We can just start with the film.
Take me to the docks, there's a ship without a name there, and it's sailing to the middle of the sea. Water there is deeper than anything you've ever seen. Jump right in and swim until you're free. I will remember your face, 'cause I am still in love with that place. When the stars are the only things we share, will you be there? Money came like rain into your hands while you were waiting for that cold old promise to appear. People in the churches started singing about their heads. He said, my God is a good God and he cares. I will remember your face, 'cause I am still in love with that place. When the stars are the only things we share, will you be there? I've got a plan. I've got an atlas in my hands. I'm gonna turn when I listen to the lessons that I've learned. I've got a plan. I've got an atlas in my hands. I'm gonna turn when I listen to the lessons that I've learned.
In the same way as you maybe would say that art is living for an artist, I think that adventure or journeys always have felt that way to me. It's almost like it's a part of my DNA and something that always has been there, really deeply rooted in me. But not in this really extreme way. A lot of people take a year of work or go on a polar expedition. To me, adventure has always been a more rational form and actually a part of my everyday life, not something that is divided into something separately. So before I even could walk, I loved riding waves. My parents took me sailing my first year, and I didn't really understand the difference between the floor and the walls of the sailboats because the sea was so rough. And I don't really have that many childhood memories. But the neighbors living next door, an old couple who dedicated most of their time traveling around the world, is a universe that is just so clear to me of all these different items from all these cultures. And when I was going to university, I decided my exchange program to be in Hawaii because I wanted to learn to surf. And I used the student loan to get a world-around ticket with 7 stops. And to make it work in the end, I lived in a van because the apartments in Waikiki is quite expensive. So this rational form of thinking around journeys is something that I feel like I always had in me. And it's been a form of creativity on how you can make reality or dream into reality in the shortest time as possible, using as little resources also as possible. So if I were to ask you today, what is your dream adventure? What is the thing that's deeply in your heart you really would like to come true? Why are you here? What are you in search of? If you think about that, and probably it's far away from how you live your normal days. It's probably far away, somewhere exotic. And if I asked you, what is your greatest adventure of today? It's most days not that spectacular. You might just come here and really haven't had a chance to think about anything in that category at all. But in my life, I strive to make these things into one as much as possible. And my adventure the last 7 years has actually been to try to live as sustainable as possible. And I know that sounds very in a form of they call it virtue, exposing this, doing it for how you feel, and I really see that it has this that it can feel threatening, because I really remember how threatening it was in the beginning, also to me. But it's been a long travel, and I've done it over time. 7 years is a long time. And this bus journey today here to Berlin, or it was first time I did that. I don't know if I will stop flying forever, but it's small steps coming together. And there is this saying, I don't know if you know it, it's Japanese, of ikigai. It's where what you love, what you're good at, what you actually can make money of, and what the world needs come to one place. And this has been an adventure for me to explore, trying to get to know my ikigai as much as possible. And they say in Japan that everyone has this. It's not something unique for some people. And I think in all the works that I've had, it's been a lot of focus outwards on what should we do to get more customers or sell more products. And this going a bit back and seeing, okay, what are we really good at, or what is I really good at? And starting from that point, instead of looking outward, is something we all should do more. I've talked of this term, sustainability, and I don't know your relationship with it here in Berlin and with this festival and travel. It's a term we hear all the time, and it's really difficult to know how to relate to it. It's been used too much in the wrong ways. So I have made my own definition how I actually relate to it. And that is thinking carefully and being more mindful in how we use our resources, and remembering that in the end there is a circle. We all go around, and this connection to nature that we sometimes tend to forget, and it's not weird in this today's society, is really something that is important to me. And I think one of the important things is that the complexity in sustainability and working on this is far too big. It's not going to be one solution that is going to solve everything. And the picture is going to change all the time. So the best we can do is to do small baby steps. And in the end, that actually becomes a leap. Food Studio, which I started in 2011, was from the beginning a journey itself. And it was one of those where you don't know at all what will come out. And I've learned that those times in life where you dare to kind of understand that you're not in control and let go, that's when the most beautiful things actually are created. Because I could never had a vision in 2011 of what it was going to be today. It's far more beautiful than what I alone could have imagined. A lot of the reason for that is that we have always worked together as a team. So it's people that share the same philosophy and actually are able to live with this belief that today's society doesn't have the answer, but we can do small steps to change it. And today, Food Studio has become a community of people with a desire to live more resource-friendly, researching, experimenting, living and developing new philosophies and understanding of what sustainability is. So the term of food empathy, that to us just have become more and more what we see that is what we do. This is the essential meaning of what food is, what journey it has taken, and the circle that it will go back to the soil in the end. And we see that you need to actually personally experience these things for it to give meaning. When you are tasting something that you have grown yourself and seen the process from a seed growing into it ripening, it tastes very different. And this way of getting understanding of what is good and not in today's society is a way of getting meaning. And in my story, I had a quite different starting point because I did have a lot of food-related illness. So I had asthma, I had eczema, headaches, and when I started changing my eating and understanding how these things were connecting, I could instantly understand with my own body why things were not good and right for me. So of course this has been my motivation and also the reason why I've been experimenting so long. And I was experimenting a long time before even starting Food Studio. So what we do is giving a stage to people who are passionate, expert on representing their different fields. It can be farmers, it can be activists, it can be researchers, or just amateurs, anyone. And then we connect those to ordinary people like yourself who come to an event. And what we do is we harvest, we cook together, we, most important of all, take a walk in nature, and we share this meal in the end. And we see that doing this and also documenting it professionally with film, photography, writing, and spreading the word out, like the magazines that I brought to you today. This is a way of telling the story of how this can be a journey, this can be inspiring. You don't need to look at being more sustainable as a loss in your life. You can actually look at it with more this adventurous goggles, like I like to say, that I put them on and then everything looks different. I want to share 2 stories with you because we've done probably over 100 events over 7 years, and it's not possible to share all with you today. I want to share one story that is 5 years ago and one story from last summer. And I'm going to start this slideshow in the back. We'll see how it works. And then tell the story. Yeah. So if you imagine that you got this really beautiful invitation, it was a letter in a bottle, and it was handwritten inside, and it said, "Into the woods." And you were coming to Oslo. You were told to come to a subway station on the west side, and meeting there 7 o'clock, you were met by this beautiful woman named Anne. She's a very, very good mixologist in the Oslo cocktail scene. And she would take you together with 15 other people with the subway into the woods. And you would, coming there, get each your a lantern so that you could find the way through this trail. And it was lighted up with beautiful lights, almost like lighthouses of ice. And when you came there, it was a Danish chef inviting you outside this lavvo or teepee, and you were served a warm beer drink that traditionally were made for the workers in Denmark, and he had been inspired by his granddad. And when you were invited inside this lavvo, you would get wool slippers and hand-knitted sweaters to keep you warm, and you were served a 5-course meal where every dish was based on the beer, both in the ingredient and also in the pairing. And the producer herself, Gitte from Bøgedal, would be there to guide you through it all. And in the end, you would have 3 baristas from world-known Tim Bendelbo, who would guide you through this ritual on each table. And you were handed out a gift and led through the woods again to the subway. That's how we used to do things in the beginning. The community it felt like a tornado effect, and people were coming through and everyone wanted to participate. Maemo, who now is known for being a 3-star Michelin restaurant, did not have any stars at all, and they were playing along. So we got a lot of energy in a direction that we really didn't control. But in the end, it ended up being quite hard to handle. So because of that, I also want to share a story of this summer, and hopefully you can understand a bit the difference on how we work today. And this time, you get the invitation a lot more randomly. You have a Facebook invite because you're interested in urban farming. And you've been to Oslo quite a few times the last 8 years, but you never managed to come to this place called Losater. This is a term for a mountain farm in Norway. And you cross the new waterfront by the opera and all these areas that still is a construction site. So when you come here, it's a very big contrast to the city around. It's right by the motor field and the main traffic machine in Oslo. But when you enter, there is this guy with a T-shirt saying "the city farmer" who welcomes you. And he explains how a weekly community dinner at Losater is performed. Because you are going to harvest the food yourself, you are going to clean it, cook it, and it's quite a chaotic experience. There is a lot of experimenting, and you can see that some people have been there for a while and are explaining to others, but some are there for the first time. There's a lot of international people, and altogether, when you sit down in the end, it's more or less 70 people around the table. People are coming and going, the children are playing, there's chickens there. So it's a very different feel. In the end, you're asked to donate a suggested price of €5 per family, while the first experience were quite more expensive. So if I were to summarize for you what the difference, other than 40 degrees of Celsius in difference between these two events, it has a lot also to do with sustainability. Because this way of creating something that was a lot based on what we thought people wanted was also really a way of exhausting ourselves. So after the guests left on the first event, I got sick, and I was sick for 10 days. And we were a team of over 20 people working for a week. So especially with the logistics, it didn't make sense at all bringing that many elements, 5 courses, plates for everything, a plate heater, like all these things out in nature. Because in the end, just making a fire and doing it simple, and nature itself is the best scenography and the best surroundings you can have. And the other thing is the shift from having passive guests to actually making the guest be a part of creating the meal together with us. Because we believe that this physically standing and doing it empowers you and actually makes you and your body believe that, okay, this is something I now can do at home. I can take this with me. So the last thing that also probably were mentioned in the introduction is that I had this year of making a Utopia project for myself. And that was very much motivated by this going from talking to acting, and quite a sense of urgency that what we see in the newspapers and how how many things that really needs to be done. And the Paris Climate Agreement inspired me a lot. So I found this researcher who had translated that into 5 areas that we as humans need to really change in our consumption. And I was also inspired by the book of Walden, Into the Woods, this quite famous author. And to me, it didn't make sense at all to make an experiment alone in the woods, taking myself completely away from my everyday. I rather do it as a part of the life that I already was living. And this empathy or adventural goggles that I was talking about, I suddenly saw that this was something I could bring to new domains, like travel. I already had gone pretty deep when it came to food, because that was what I had been working with for 7 years. But when it comes to travel, I had been all over the world, always been super curious and wanting to see new places. So the step of stopping flying for a year was a quite big shift for me. And I sold my diesel car. I really started out of, what do I have lying around? What is it that makes sense to just use? And it's a parallel to how you start cooking, seeing in your refrigerator, what do you have in storage? It's a little bit taking that mindset over to travel. And what I had lying around was a sailboat, my bike, I had a tent, I had some skills in both sailing and cooking. And based on that, I managed to make a quite interesting year. And I think what was the most inspiring part was all the things that I was leaving out, all this disturbance that normally takes so much space in our lives, because we don't really pay attention to how much alternatives we have all the time. So leaving a lot of them out really opened up for more possibilities and made it a lot more fun to be creative also. And then also trying to make it into a rhythm. I don't know how familiar you are with the Ayurvedic philosophy and that way of thinking around food. It's an old Indian tradition parallel to the yoga system. But it's really this how you find a rhythm in every day that actually takes both care of you and where you're careful to your environment. And I was introduced to that philosophy a year ago, but it made so much sense, and I feel like that was very much a part of how I started thinking last year. So the adventure for the future and for this year is also a lot. I'm still staying in Oslo. I don't have any big plans for travel this year. And that's mainly because I just feel like I should do a lot in my local communities right now. So I entered this farm life project. Gestalten has this book with them today that we did as a co-editor together with them, because we see that there is so many farms where the owners, they can't get their kids to take over, and there is a really crisis in terms of how are we gonna make these generation shifts in a more in a more productive way. And there's also so few young people who really want to go into farming and producing of food because it is so much work. So actually dedicating some time to go deeper into understanding that and doing that in a community project is one of the big things that I and Food Studio are working with right now. We're also going to do this pilgrimage, walking for 5 weeks from Oslo to Trondheim, and we are going to connect bakers and farmers and on the way to talk about ancient grains. And that is a project we will see what it ends up being. It's on the starting point right now. And also we see that our team is really spreading out our wings. We have a lot of the people who used to live in Oslo and used to dedicate a lot of time working with us there, who now have moved back to different places all over the world, and they really want to take this toolbox and way of thinking with them. So we have 2 girls who actually want to do something in Brussels. I don't know if they're planning to do something in Berlin this year, but you should at least follow us if you're interested in learning more about that. And I wanted to also show you a video in the end, just to show you a bit more how this project of the city farmer and the Losetter is working. The talking is in Norwegian, but I think you will get the picture by watching it. So just don't lose it completely because of the Norwegian talking, and I think you will understand what you need to do.
Det noen av dere som vet hvordan gulrøttene ser ut når de står i jorda, eller? Du kan gå inn her, så kan dere se om dere finner noen gulrøtter. Se hvordan hvis dere graver bitte litt i jorda. Der 1, 2, og kom igjen. Nei, du må bli med, jeg greier ikke alene. Du må ta tak i det gresset. Sånn, ja, så drar vi sammen. Oi! Det var en liten svær gulrøtt. Gulrøtt! Det var bra. Godt takk, og så tar vi igjen. Oi! Der kom en, gitt! Så bra! Får dere kose dere med gulrøttene? Det er bra. Sånn som den midterste her fin. Ja.
Og kunne smake så god salat. Så dette er en stor opplevelse faktisk, så gratulerer med dagen, må jeg nesten si.
Everything is ripening now, so we've got all the traditional veggies. So. For oss det veldig vidt å komme. Jeg tror det fullt i middag, for å si det sånn. Nå står 30 folk ute og her. De var svære, da. Og hva tror dere, folkens? Tror dere vi har funnet nok poteter til suppa vår? Bra. Nyt. Det er lov å kose seg. Sett i gang. Det er det.
thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.